Good evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, January 29th. It was disclosed on Tuesday that there are no traitors in Parliament regarding foreign interference. And while that's good news for Canadians who care about democratic integrity, there are a lot to go through to really understand what's in the 121-page report. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh spoke to reporters yesterday about the biggest concerns addressed in Justice Oog's report.
What Justice Hogue has highlighted, I think one of the biggest points that she made in her report was the deep concern she has regarding misinformation and disinformation, particularly on social media. What other things that Justice Hogue highlighted, I want to point out, is she said that all political leaders should get security clearance and receive information that is pertinent to their parties or to democracy in general. And that highlights the real concerns that Canadians have raised about Pierre Poilievre, the only leader of a political party that has not received security clearance. And so that was highlighted.
Bloc Québécois leader Guy-Francois Blanchet also reacted to the foreign interference report. He implied that while there may not be traitors in Parliament, some politicians can be described as useful idiots.
Useful idiot is an expression which, thanks God, I did not create. It is used by those in the intelligence services who describe people who unknowingly are being manipulated through soft spying initiatives, having a drink tonight with a beautiful lady, or being received in a much larger room than what you needed when you traveled around the world, or whatever like that, which makes one too comfortable and available or inclined to speak too much. They are called useful idiots, and they are not criminals. They are somewhat idiots. Either they do it purposefully or not. This is why Mr. Poilievre should get the security clearance, make sure that there is no one in his caucus or within his candidates whom should be described as somewhat useful, if not idiot.
The Toronto Sun's Brian Pasifum joined us this morning for more on the report.
There was a lot of there's a lot in the report that was really critical. The government said that even though that there was no evidence of any foreign tampering in 2019 and 2021, that the government really dropped the ball when it came to protecting its interests against foreign interference and transparency. One of the things that really kind of popped out when I was reading the report, I was in the lockup yesterday for it, was that she blasted the government for the fact that that regular people found out about this in the media, not through the government. They found out that this foreign interference issue from reading about it in the newspaper, which she says really shouldn't happen. The government needs to be more transparent and needs to have better processes in place and better mechanisms at hand to ensure that A, that our elections aren't compromised, and B, that Canada's better equipped to deal with foreign actors who want to meddle in our affairs. Kind of the one that really jumped out at me, particularly considering the leadership race that the Liberals are going right now, is that they wanted to sort of show up the rules on who is allowed to vote a nomination, a leadership contest. Right now, the rules under the Election Act right now only apply to elections. But one of the suggestions that Justice Hogue had was expanding some of those rules, including ensure that only Canadian citizens or permanent residents are permitted to vote in nomination of leadership contests. There's been a few instances. There was, there were stories and testimony that the commission heard about busloads of Chinese foreign students coming to, fraudulently register to vote in a leadership contest. Things like that, as well. Parties are also asked to maintain records of who voted, to record proof that each person who voted in a nomination or leadership contest is eligible to vote, that they're a Canadian citizen or a PR. That was surprising to me that the parties didn't already do that.
All right, stay tuned. Coming up next, President Trump's press secretary confirms that the plan to hit Canada with tariffs on Saturday is still on the books. Jagmeet Singh calls on the Liberal government to present its tariff response plan, and BC's premier is promising pandemic-style relief to protect citizens from the effects of any U.S. tariffs. Stay with us. Forum Daily will return shortly. U.S. President Donald Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, told reporters at the White House on Tuesday that the plan to slap Canada with punishing tariffs on Saturday is still in play.
I won't get ahead of the president again on advocating to foreign nations on what they should or shouldn't do to get away from these tariffs. The president has made it very clear, again, that he expects every nation around this world to cooperate with the repatriation of their citizens. And the president has also put out specific statements in terms of Canada and Mexico when it comes to what he expects in terms of border security. We have seen a historic level of cooperation from Mexico. But again, as far as I'm still tracking, and that was last night talking to the president directly, February 1st is still on the books.
Mr. Trump initially promised 25% across-the-board tariffs in response to what he called the failure of both countries to curb the illegal flow of people and drugs across the border. The president has since linked the tariff threat to economic and trade concerns with Canada and has said repeatedly that it should become the 51st state. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling on the Liberal government to present its tariff response plan to the opposition and that he's going to be open to supporting the plan despite previous comments about toppling the government when Parliament reconvenes.
If there is any desire to move forward, the government should call us together like we did during COVID and discuss a plan that supports workers. We, as a party of working people, a party founded by workers, want to make sure that there's a plan in place for workers. It's why we said from the beginning, EI is clearly not up to the task. During the pandemic, we realized EI does not cover the majority of Canadian workers. We called for changes to happen to EI so that we would be better prepared if something happens again that disrupts our economy. The Liberals did not listen. And so we are now in this position where we have an insufficient EI, the threat of tariffs.
The other opposition leaders have pledged to topple the government at their first chance, and major spending would require support from at least one other party. BC Premier David Eby is promising pandemic-style relief to protect British Columbians from the effects of any U.S. tariffs.
As our finance minister is pulling together the budget, as she's doing the work with her team in the Ministry of Finance, every decision is being made through the lens of British Columbia and Canada potentially heading into a protracted trade war with the United States and all the consequences that that could mean for families around lower dollar resulting in higher costs for groceries, around potential impacts to employment and everything that brings with it, including the inability to make payments on your house, whether it's rent or a mortgage. This is a big deal for families. We're going to make sure that we have the resources available to support people, whatever the consequences are. There's always the possibility that we don't see those kinds of impacts, or we don't see the tariffs, or they're different than were advertised. You just never know. And so hopefully, we'll hope for the best. But British Columbia should know that we are preparing for the worst, and we're going to be in a position to support them alongside the federal government.
He says that could include employment insurance, as well as grants and loans for businesses. Mr. Eby says the next month's budget and every decision by his ministers will be made through the lens of a potentially protracted trade war. He says he'd support matching tariffs on U.S. goods with the funds collected used to help businesses survive and diversify. A new survey finds that 8 in 10 Canadian business leaders want a targeted dollar-for-dollar retaliatory response should U.S. President Donald Trump deliver on his tariff threat this weekend. KPMG and Canada's Joy Knott, a partner in the trade and customs practice at the firm, says the survey indicates business leaders want Canada to stand firm, fight back, and be united. Ms. Knott says businesses are willing to endure short-term pain if it means negotiating a fair trade deal for the country. Quebec's immigration minister says the Canadian model of multiculturalism doesn't work for the province. Jean-Francois Roberge says the province will table a new bill on the integration of immigrants this week.
A Canadian culture or a Quebec culture. With our plan, with our bill, we will be pretty clear. We are a nation. We have a culture. We have some democratic values. Men and women are equal. And people coming here must accept that. And after, we want them to contribute to the society. So this is completely new, and this is really different from what the Canada is saying.
He said there will be mechanisms in the law to ensure its principles are followed, but didn't offer any other details. All right, don't go anywhere. Up next, a spokesperson for Israel's prime minister says that the 4 female hostages that were released over the weekend face a long and complex road to recovery. And U.S. President Donald Trump extends an invitation for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit the White House on February 4th. Stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. On Monday, in response to the release of 4 Israeli hostages on Saturday, the spokesperson for Israel's prime minister explained that while the families of the hostages are overjoyed for the return of their loved ones, the 4 women will face a long and complex road to recovery.
The girls have told their families about a pita or 2 a day until their stomachs swelled. They were made to cook for their captors, but forbidden from eating. They were held in tunnels in the dark. Their doctors have said that mentally there is still a long way to go and it's too soon to say precisely of their condition, and doctors are braced for them to have lost part of their vision and had to have developed skin conditions, hearing difficulties after so long underground in cramped, squalid surroundings. Medics have also been concerned that Hamas may have drugged them, and this may explain why the 4 girls were seen smiling ecstatically as they were paraded in front of terrorists in their sickening handover ceremonies. Those released in the November 2023 deals spoke of being given narcotics to make them appear happy. Doctors have carried out tests for toxins. Hamas put on a show on Saturday. We're asking people of goodwill around the world, please do not fall for it.
Commentator Isabella Hazan joined us earlier today for more on the road to recovery, both for those who have been released and for the hostages who are set to be released this week.
So it's going to be a very, very long and difficult road to recovery. Israeli experts have been talking about how complex it is, both the mental health trauma, the psychological trauma, and just the very complex trauma of being taken as a hostage, held captive in under tunnels. Some hostages were held with families, some underground, other hostages were held with no people at all. And those who are mostly isolated are going to have an even more difficult road to recovery. We know that there are very large efforts to protect the privacy of the hostages because, of course, we feel that they are ours and we struggled with them every day, fighting for them for the days that they were in captivity. But these are people who have their own privacy concerns. I know that in the Balaton Hospital in Petah Tikva near Tel Aviv, the medical professionals are taped their phones in order to protect the privacy of the hostages. They have red tape on their phones so nothing leaks. Conditions, vision problems, digestion issues. We know that the Israeli Health Ministry was concerned about refeeding syndrome for the hostages, a complications for after when they eat. They can lead to death because they're not used to eating. And we know when we hear from the released hostages that they were allowed to have maybe 1 pita per day, which is not enough calories. They suffered serious malnutrition. And Agam Berger was not released with the rest of the women, with the rest of the soldiers that were taken. And a lot of Israelis are very concerned over why that is, likely for her health conditions. Hopefully, God willing, she'll be released this Thursday. And I also want to focus on some of the resilience of these women. The sign from Emily Damari, the symbol, has become a symbol of resilience, of her missing fingers. We know that she still has shrapnel in her body. Many of the hostages weren't given proper medical treatment whatsoever. We know that Miashem was operated on by a veterinarian. But these women have endured such serious trauma, and they're heroes in Israel right now. They're being celebrated, whether it's Emily Damari's symbol of resistance here that has become iconic, or even hearing stories from Liri Albag, who was one of the leaders as a hostage. When it was time to speak to the Hamas captors, she would go and represent. We heard from Amit Susana, who spoke out about the rape and the sexual violence, that Liri saved her life and she defended her and she gave her hope. So we see this is going to be, we see the resilience, but we also see that this is going to be a very intense, serious long road ahead. Israeli medical professionals are now emphasizing on the importance of them being able to make choices. So when they were released, they had told them, if you do you want to take a shower first, do you want to eat first, and slowly, integrating them and having them feel this sense of self again.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday that President Donald Trump has invited him to visit the White House on February 4th. This will make Mr. Netanyahu the first foreign leader to visit Washington in Mr. Trump's second term. The visit comes as the U.S. is pressuring Israel and Hamas to continue a ceasefire that has paused a devastating 15-month war in Gaza. The United Nations said on Tuesday that under the ceasefire, more than 375,000 Palestinians have crossed into northern Gaza since Israel allowed their return on Monday morning. That represents over a third of the million people who fled in the war's opening days. Coming up, the Bank of Canada lowers its key interest rate to 3%, and an advocacy group says their doomsday clock points at Earth moving closer to destruction. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this. The Bank of Canada has lowered its key interest rate by a quarter percentage point, bringing it to 3%. It's the central bank's sixth straight cut since June, with inflation sitting around 2%. It says the cuts are having an effect on the economy, but the threat of U.S. tariffs is creating uncertainty for its outlook. Governor Tiff Macklem says that even if tariffs hit, it will be hard to predict their impact. Concordia University's Dr. Moshe Lander joined us earlier for more on the rate cut.
So if you had asked me before the US election, so 2.5 months ago, would the Bank of Canada cut interest rates in January, I would have said that it's probably a coin flip that they would cut rates. Once Trump won, I would say that it's better than a coin flip's chance. And then with the threat of tariffs, it was pretty much a guaranteed. So the Bank of Canada hasn't done anything that is not predictable, that's not correct. The issue now is, what are they going to do when tariffs come? And this is going to be a timing issue as much as anything. The Bank of Canada meets at 8 designated times in the year. That's on their website. It's already predetermined. So it's not some random when should we meet again. We know when they're going to meet. That next meeting is going to be in March. And so even if the Trump administration doesn't come in this weekend with tariffs, let's say that they decide to give us another 2-week extension or another 2-week extension after that, there's a good chance that by the next time the Bank of Canada meets, they're going to be faced with, how do we deal with tariffs? Now, again, if you had asked me back in 2024, I would have said that the Bank of Canada has 1 full percentage point worth of cuts to give in 2025. It's just an issue of how they want to portion them out. Same issue, I think, still exists today, that they now have 3/4 of a percentage point left. Do they want to front load it based on the tariffs? Do they want to hold it, wait to see the GDP data, wait to see what happens to the Canadian dollar, wait to see if Trump delivers on his promise to flatten prices, lower prices, give space for interest rate cuts? Those are the types of things that would make me a little hesitant to use it in March. All of that said, there's an election coming in this country, and the Bank of Canada generally tries not to make key decisions during an election campaign because they don't want to be seen to be influencing any of the election outcomes. So if there's an election, say for 4 weeks, and during that 4-week period, there's a Bank of Canada meeting scheduled, they will probably decide to push unless there's an absolutely compelling reason that everybody could agree we need to act now. So timing now starts to become an issue then. When does Parliament come back? How long will the new leader last in place before they call an election? How long is that election campaign going to be? And that has the possibility to disrupt 1, maybe 2 of their spring, early summer meetings. And so there's a good chance that we might actually see one of those interest rate cuts moved into the March meeting, just so that they have space in April or in late spring to not have to make that decision during an election.
A new report says that Canadian pet owners feel the cost of food for their furry friend is rising faster than inflation on human groceries. Online pet care marketplace Rover.com found the rising costs of pet food is causing the most financial pressure among those surveyed. Experts suggest that speaking with a veterinarian who might be able to recommend cost-saving alternatives or supplements to keep dogs or cats healthy. A science-oriented advocacy group says the Earth is moving closer to destruction. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists said on Tuesday that they've moved their doomsday clock to 89 seconds to midnight due to worsening threats ranging from nuclear war and climate change to pandemics and artificial intelligence. The clock had stood at 90 seconds to midnight for the past 2 years. The Union for RCMP members says Canada and the U.S. should make it easier to buy new technology and boost border staffing. The National Police Federation also calls for improved collaboration to deal with security challenges at the border. The union says recent discussions with Canadian and U.S. police and public safety unions helped to draft a set of recommendations. They include streamlining the process to buy new technology and equipment so police can be more nimble against changing trends. On Tuesday at 11:31 a.m. Eastern, Boom Supersonic's XB-1 passenger jet achieved a successful test flight, becoming the first civilian-produced aircraft to break the sound barrier.
And she's airborne. Wow, that was fantastic. Doesn't she look gorgeous? Especially when the gear's up, she looks an absolutely beautiful airplane. And in the pilot's world, we say that if an aircraft looks right, she'll fly right. And XB-1 certainly looks right.
During the test, the aircraft reached an altitude of 34,000 feet before accelerating to the speed of sound. Boom Supersonic hopes to become the first supersonic passenger jet airline since the retired British-French Concorde. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website at thenewsforum.ca. Good night, Canada.